All right, we're set.
Have a good meeting. Bye-bye.
All right, welcome everyone. So let's see, it is 7:02. I'm going to call the meeting to order. My name is Deb Travis. I am the new chair of the Bronx Community Board 8 Parks and Recreation Committee. I was elected at the October Community Board 8 meeting. A little bit about me: I've been a member of the Parks Committee since I first joined the Community Board 4 years ago. I have come to Parks Committee meetings for several years before that, because I run a volunteer parks stewardship group called Jerome Park Friends and Neighbors, and where we take care of the parks around the Jerome Park Reservoir, specifically at this point for Independence and the Sedgwick beds along the horticultural beds along Sedgwick Avenue, and Washington's Walk and Fort Ford. So that's where I'm coming from. And let's see, I have just a few housekeeping items I always think are really helpful to say at the start of a meeting. As a community board committee, we loosely follow Robert's Rules of Order. We will be following the agenda that was previously distributed. If we open a topic to general discussion, we ask that if you would like to speak, that you raise your hand and I will call on you. Our goal is to have a good, robust discussion of all of our agenda items. However, if we have a lot of people who want to speak, you may only get to speak once. So please make sure to make it count. If you're not speaking, we ask that you keep yourself muted to prevent background noise from interrupting other people. If you're on Zoom, to raise your hand, you will select reactions at the bottom of the screen. If you're on the phone, it's *6 to mute and unmute. It just toggles, and it's *9 to raise your hand. So with that said, I will do a quick roll call. I'm still admitting people. This is good. Lots of folks. Let's see. So Bob Bender, present.
Here.
Deb Travis, I'm here. Leona Tetton.
Hi, I'm here. Sorry, I just got out of school.
Oh, well, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Scott Crompinger.
Present.
Great to have you. Rob Jaklowski. Ramdat Singh, are you on? Ramdat? And David Gelman, are you here yet? Just confirming. Okay. Any other board members? I see that Chair Laura Spalter of the Community Board 8 is here. Thank you. Welcome. Karen Argenti, who's a community member for the Environment and Sanitation Committee, is here. I see you. And also, I guess, with Bronx Council of Environmental Quality. That's your capacity this evening. Any other Community Board 8 members? Are there any elected officials or representatives from elected officials here tonight? I know Ned Klein, you're here. Frederick, I see you as well.
Yes, I'm here all night.
Welcome. Good to see you. So I'm going to mute them. All right. Any other elected officials who are here? All right, great. And then we do have a Captain Sanchez from the South, who's the South Bronx Commanding Officer for PEP Enforcement here tonight. We have Captain Bayram who's a North Bronx commander for the PEP Enforcement. I saw Stephanie Ehrlich is here, the Executive Director for Van Cortlandt Park Alliance and the Park Administrator for Van Cortlandt Park. Anybody else who are with any city agencies?
Waited 7 years for this moment, an outpouring of grief and relief after the verdict was reached.
All right, there, David Gelman is here.
Their son and brother are senior at Oceanside.
Mute. If I mute you, it's only because of the special offers being offered in the background on your television. Right, so I would like to start off with the first round of business, which is the approval of the minutes of for the meeting of September 28th. We submitted these, they were distributed in advance to committee members. Does anybody on the committee have any changes? All right, if there are no objections, I move to approve the amended minutes by unanimous consent. All right, so the minutes of September 28th, 2022 are unanimously approved. I'm going to start with just the chair's report. That's the first, oops, First item is pickleball. I don't have much of an update on it. I know that the Parks Department is currently working with PS24. However, the current site, which was discussed at the last meeting, which is behind PS24, may not be available because it's being used by the students. So Parks though is continuing to work on that project. Next up is Veterans Day. On did I not write on Veterans Day? I did not write the date. There's going to be a really
November
wonderful-
6th, Deb, Sunday, November
Sunday.
6th.
Thank you. On Sunday, November 6th, in Van Cortlandt Park in Memorial Grove, there's going to be a really wonderful celebration of Veterans Day. So everyone is invited to attend. It is 9 a.m. It starts and it goes until 2 p.m.
Oh, Deb, it
correction.
starts at 12 noon.
Wow,
Really? Okay.
Yes.
Is there a cleanup event at 9 o'clock?
on Friday.
There's the cleanup event. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Stephanie.
I'm going
sorry,
to
Bob.
defer to Stephanie Ehrlich, who is the subject matter expert on this, who will give correct information to the general public. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. There's a cleanup activity on Friday at 9 a.m. In the Grove, and all are welcome to join us. We'll be raking leaves and getting the Grove ready for the event on Sunday, which is at noon.
Okay.
And it is Community Board 8 and Van Cortlandt Park Alliance who are hosting.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for filling in on that. I appreciate it. There is also finally a hearing on the New York City purchase of the CSX property. That is on Wednesday, November 9th at 10 a.m. Is that correct? Okay. This purchase will make possible the daylighting of Tibbetts Brook. So that the daylighting of Tibbetts Brook is one of the largest capital projects we will see in our lifetimes. It's super wonderful that a new park is being born in front of us and that the Tibbetts Brook watershed will have a way to get to the Harlem River. The hearing is open to the public and will take place by conference call on November 9th at 10 a.m. You can just reach out to the board office if you would like the conference call number and access code and such. You can also submit comments 2 days in advance before the real property hearing. And you can also just reach out to the board office if you need that information and we can provide it for you. And so without further ado, I want to start with our first item, which is the presentation from Groundworks Hudson Valley. Oded Holzinger, I believe, is on the call. I think I saw him come. To lay the foundation of, and also Stephanie Ehrlich is here from the Van Cortlandt Park. So to lay the foundation in September of 2021, Groundwork Hudson Valley came to our committee to get feedback for the feasibility study they were working on with MKM Associates. They have been working on this project for several years, and it's to connect the Yonkers Greenway through Van Cortlandt Park to 42nd Street subway station. So I'm going to leave the rest of the floor to Oded Holzinger with Groundwork Hudson Valley to make the presentation of the final version of your feasibility report.
Thank you so much, Deborah, and thank you all Community Board 8 members and the Parks and Recreation Committee members for inviting us to present once again this project to you. Hi, Stephanie, good to see you here. So just for some context, this project, for those of you who haven't been to previous presentation, this is a project we started in 2019 through a grant that we received from New York State Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation Office to conduct a feasibility study of what could happen at the connection between the future Yonkers Greenway and Van Cortlandt Park. And I will speak towards the end of the presentation a little bit about the Yonkers Greenway and provide an update on that project. But first I want to give you some update on the feasibility study that was published. So if you could just enable, Deborah, if you could enable screen sharing for me.
There you go. You should be all set.
Thank you. And while I'm speaking, the feasibility study itself is currently on the website of the Community Board 8 under if you go to the website of Community Board website, you go to the Parks and Recreation Committee and you'll see it there. And I also shared with Deborah all the documents that are in the addenda for the addenda of the report, so you could have access to all of these documents.
Yeah, just contact the board office and we will send you the link.
Okay, so could you all see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So yes, as I mentioned, Groundwork Hudson Valley, we're a Yonkers-based environmental nonprofit. We were part of developing the vision and the plan for the Yonkers Greenway, which is a rail trail project traversing through Southwest and all the way Southwest Yonkers all the way to downtown Yonkers, along the abandoned Putnam Railroad Getty Square Spur. Now, as part of this greater vision, we wanted to also look into what could be done at the southern portion of that abandoned railroad, which went through the Northwest Forest section of Van Cortlandt Park. And so we developed this, the grant, we received the funding from New York State. We also partnered with the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance, who were advisors on this project for us and provide us a lot of local knowledge. Of course, we worked closely with New York City Parks Department as well. And throughout the project, we hired, through an RFP, we hired MKM Landscape Architecture, who helped us in developing this report. So first, I want to just quickly review the main objectives for the study. So we conducted this study to determine who uses the park, which entry points are the most utilized and why they are most utilized, focusing, of course, on the Northwest Forest section. We wanted to examine potential alternatives for a bikeable connection between Southwest Yonkers and the 242nd Street. So the Yonkers Greenway Trail is going to be a trail for both cyclists and pedestrians. And so as part of this study, we wanted to examine possibilities of also allowing for a bikeable connection between South Yonkers and the endpoint, which is the 242nd Street. We wanted to raise awareness of the park as a possible pedestrian linkage between Yonkers and Van Cortlandt Park's amenities in the Bronx, mostly south of Moshe Lou Avenue, to promote access to open space and nature for Southwest Yonkers residents. So these neighborhoods in Southwest Yonkers are neighborhoods that generally are lacking accessible green space, while the Northwest Forest is one of their most major parks next to their neighborhood. Determine concerns and wishes of the community at large from both sides of the border for potential gateway between Yonkers and the Bronx, eventually improving pedestrian access, and to determine how and where Bronx and Yonkers residents with disabilities can more easily access the park, provide data points that will enable enhanced stewardship, investigate whether park users want more signage and mapping, and finally, assess physical conditions and address all kinds of safety issues in the Northwest Forest. And now I'm going to just review the main findings. And again, I don't want to take too much time here, so I really encourage all of you to look at the report in fully. These are just the main findings. So first and foremost, and I put it on the top of the list because I know that this is the most sensitive topic here, the main an important finding of this feasibility study is that there is no feasibility for a a bikeable connection through Van Cortlandt Park. So although the Yonkers Greenway is going to be accessible for both cyclists and pedestrians, we found both on the physical as well as the political level that there is just currently the Northwest Forest doesn't have any paths that are designated for bikes, and the community at large prefers that to stay the situation. Therefore, there is no feasibility for continuing the bike path through the forest. Broadway bike lanes as the main bicycle connection. So as part of the Yonkers Greenway, the city of Yonkers is going to install bike lanes on South Broadway, which is the Yonkers section of Broadway. And that is going to be the main bikeable connection between Yonkers and the Yonkers Greenway to the 242nd subway station. This is an important connection that we believe will be a great service for the residents of Yonkers that commute to the New York City subway system and back. Park signage and mapping should direct pedestrians to use the bridle trail as the main pedestrian connection between Yonkers and Van Cortlandt Park amenities south of Moshul Avenue. So part of the study reviewed the different paths and trails throughout the park, throughout the forest, and made some recommendations on how to really make sure that the bridle path, which is a main wide path, will be obvious as the main path, while other paths such as the Caskeliger are going to be secondary paths, not encouraging pedestrians to use them as the main connection to the park amenities. On the Yonkers side, there is a desire for an improved pedestrian connection to the Northwest Forest. The study identifies the Van Cortlandt Park Avenue access point, which you can see in the photo here currently, as the most fitting for such improvements. This is something that through the survey we've done and community engagement event, we found some support. Also in the Bronx side, there was also some resistance to that. All of these opinions are expressed in the report. When it comes to ADA compliant, this is something that we had to address and look at also, given that this is a state-funded project. When it comes to ADA compliance, we found that access is only feasible along Carroll Field. So you can see that thicker line right here, eventually saying that if the Parks Department chose to provide ADA compliant access to the park, it could only be a short in and out near Kelly Field, because there is just not any physical feasibility anywhere else. No, we also looked at potential loops and could not find any good ones. On both sides of the border, there is a strong desire to improve the conditions along the border and address unwanted uses. So some examples that we found through our community engagement process is that on both sides of the borders, people want to see more means to prevent ATV access, preventing cyclists from using trails that are currently not designated for bicycle use. Right now, as I mentioned, the Northwest Forest does not have any cyclable paths. Improving the general feeling of safety through design and enforcement. That's something we heard again from on both sides of the border, that along the border, the northern border, sometimes there is an issue with the feeling of safety. Improving the area's cleanliness, signage and maps on the unique qualities of a forever wild urban forest. So this is something we heard a lot from your community members, and we really learned to appreciate this connection between the community and the Forever Wild Forest. And we think it's really important to share and educate the community that lives near that forest about what is a Forever Wild Forest and why certain uses are prevented in a Forever Wild Forest. And finally, supporting native habitats and addressing invasive species issues. That is something we also did in partnership with the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance through our youth programs, who, as part of this project, worked to remove invasive species along the Yonkers-Bronx border. A little bit about the community outreach that we've done throughout this project. So in May 2019, we met some of you at our office to present this project. This was a group of residents that reached out to us to express their opposition to any bicycle infrastructure in the Northwest Forest, and we learned from them about the reasons for why they oppose it. Later this month, we presented to this committee. We provided an initial presentation of what we're going to look at in this project. During fall of 2021, we conducted a community input survey. We got almost 250 people replied to the survey in full, and we got a lot of really great information from that. All of that is available on the report as well. In September, and the survey, of course, was filled out by residents on both sides of the border. In September of 2021, we conducted an update presentation to the Community Board Parks and Recreation Committee. And in October of that year, we conducted a community engagement event in Yonkers, as you can see in the images right here. That was right next to the Van Cortlandt Park Avenue site. And in that event, we set up tables and a portable kiosk on the street. So residents could approach and they were encouraged to take the survey. We also produced posters showing different maps of the park's trails, different aspects of the parks, and we asked residents to select certain typology for a potential gateway, an improved gateway to the park. Most residents of Southwest Yonkers were familiar with the park. Many use it, and we found that a lot of them use it to just walk there. A lot of them also stated safety as a main concern, and that a more open gateway, more inviting gateway would make them feel safer. Especially residents who live right nearby the park, they advocated for more inviting and better organized access point to the park that will elicit any illegal behavior and practices that are currently taking place behind. If they take place, it happens behind the overgrown fence. That might be more inviting for negative activity than for positive activity. And finally, I wanted to give you an update on the Yonkers Greenway project. So the city of Yonkers is now finalizing the design and construction documents, which then have to be receive final approval from New York State DOT. But eventually we're looking at an off-street path that will run along the abandoned rail bed through the neighborhood just north of Van Cortlandt Park. A very important update regarding this section is that unfortunately there will still be a gap between the Yonkers Greenway start point or end point, the southmost point, and Van Cortlandt Park. It's about 1.5 blocks that the city did not include in the design. So the Yonkers, for those of you who are familiar with the area, the Yonkers Greenway is gonna, the southern point of the Greenway is gonna start at the north end of the Carroll Avenue parking lot, which is a municipal parking lot just north of Carroll Avenue. So pedestrians who would want to access Van Cortlandt Park would then have to walk on the sidewalk along Van Cortlandt Park Avenue. And we're now also working with the city trying to make sure that there will be some signage directing trail users to the access Van Cortlandt Park through Van Cortlandt Park Avenue. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, the Yonkers Greenway Park will include bike lanes. These are not going to be protected bike lanes like on Broadway in the Bronx, but instead it will be standard bike lanes on South Broadway that will create a bikeable connection from the Bronx, from the 242nd Street subway station, all the way to the Summer River Daylighting Park, and the Yonkers waterfront and the science barge that we run. So this is currently due to be implemented during 2024. We really hope that this timeline will be the actual timeline. And once it's implemented, we hope that all of the cyclists in the audience here would utilize this new connection to explore beautiful downtown Yonkers. So this is the update. Again, I want to encourage you all to review the report and stay in touch with us. I could share my email with everyone if you want to provide any additional comments on the report. And more than anything else, I want to thank you all for all the input that some of you provided throughout this project. And as you could see in the final report, the input that you provided made a real impact on the direction that we chose to take this project, on what we chose to leave out of the project, and what we chose to focus on. So your voices were heard and are still heard, and I want to thank you all for providing that input.
Well, I want to thank you, Oded, for that presentation. It was very informative. I think I speak for at least a lot of folks who are kind of breathing a sigh of relief that there's not a bike lane running through the Northwest Forest. So, thank you for taking that feedback that came from the community, certainly last September, and integrating into the report. One thing I did want to ask, and then I'll kind of open it up to the committee for questions, is just a little bit more specifics about where bicycles will be as they're coming down on this greenway. Because Carroll Avenue it has some real hills on it, and is the expectation that folks will, the off-road part looks really beautiful. I'm sure will look lovely when you're done. Are you going to have how are you going to direct people back over to the Broadway bike lane so that they can continue to get further down south?
Yes, great question. So first, the Yonkers Greenway, again, it's while it is designated for cyclists, we expect that it's going to be mainly used by pedestrians. And the main connection for cyclists from the Yonkers Greenway is going to be through McLean Avenue to the bike lanes on South Broadway lane. So the off-street path of the Yonkers Greenway is going to exist both south of McLean and north of McLean on the section known as Sutherland Park in the Park Hill neighborhood.
Would you happen to have a map?
Yeah, I'll just put the same map up to show what I mean.
That would be really helpful.
Yeah. So again, this is the north end of the Carroll Avenue parking lot. There are going to be
but I don't see your cursor. Are you thinking you're pointing at some? Oh, there it is. Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, sorry. So right here, this is the southern end of the off-street path at the north end of Carroll Avenue parking lot, there's going to be some bike parking there that will be installed, bike racks. And then the off-street path crosses McLean Avenue and continues through the abandoned rail bed along Sutherland Park, which is part of the Park Hill neighborhood.
Okay.
So the only feasible connection to South Broadway is right here through McLean Avenue. I would say that this is going to encourage commuters who want to ride their bike down to the Bronx, down to the subway system, to simply use the bike lanes along South Broadway. Carroll Avenue, right now, the city of Yonkers addresses it as a shared bike and vehicle path. That's also what you would see if you look on Google Maps and you turn on the bike layer. I personally would not choose to ride my bike on Carroll Avenue because of the hilly nature of it. I will say that in the determination of, in the recommendation that we put in the report for what an improved access to Van Cortlandt Park through Van Cortlandt Park Avenue could look like, we specifically addressed that it would need to encourage pedestrian access and discourage bicycle access, given that currently there are no bikeable paths in the Northwest Forest. So again, this is just a feasibility study. These are recommendations that we would then give to the New York City Parks Department, and whatever they choose to do with it, I hope they address both of these recommendations of encouraging pedestrians, discouraging any other uses.
Okay, well, that actually gets to one of my next question, which was simply in terms of next steps. You've put together the feasibility study. Is the intention of groundwork Hudson Valley to just simply give it to the Parks Department and walk away, or what? Or would be your actual? What else are you going to do programmatically to encourage the construction of this particular part of the Greenway?
So the next step for us will be, together with the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance, to meet with the relevant people at the Parks Department and present to them the report, present to them the input which came from the community. And based on the input that we get from the Parks Department, I think that would give us an idea of what are other potential next steps when it comes to identifying new funding resources to potentially promote some additional design.
So in the study itself, it calls for the removal of trees and stuff like that, which you didn't really highlight in your presentation. Is that something that you're kind of stepping back from? It sounded like from your kind of summary right now that really the trails themselves would remain untouched and that primarily you're focusing on entrance points. Is that true? Is that a true statement, or are you still thinking, would your feasibility study and your recommendation to parks involve a lot of work on the trails?
So I wouldn't say that the report calls for a removal of trees. What it does, there are two areas where it says that feasibility of a certain connection would require removal of trees. This is one of them is looking at the feasibility of connecting the Northwest Forest for pedestrian access to amenities south of Mosholu Avenue through a construction of, so we looked at, as part of the study, we looked at the feasibility of improving access to all park amenities, including those south of Mosholu. And so what the study found is that a pedestrian bridge could be built over Mosholu, continuing the old path of the Putnam Railroad Getty Square Spur, and that will require removal of trees. The study does not call for that. It just says that that is a feasible solution for bridging that gap. Other than that, when it comes to the recommendation for a gateway park at Van Cortlandt Park Avenue. So Van Cortlandt Park Avenue is at the end of the Cascaliger Trail, and we do recommend that entry point to be the entry point to look at if you're looking for any improvement of pedestrian access, because it's just more visible to the general public. It's not hidden like the Saratoga access point, and but it will require connecting it to creating a better connection to the bridle trail, because it's lower down. And so the study mentions that this could be done through a set of stairs that will connect it, or that there is also feasibility for a ramp, but that will require removal of trees. So at any place it doesn't call for the removal of trees, it just looks at certain feasible alternatives, and it mentions the alternatives that will require removal of trees.
Okay, all right, thank you. So I'm going to open up to the committee. Is there anybody on the committee who has any questions? Scott, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Deb. And thank you for your presentation. I just noticed in this study, there were three proposals for the entrances on Van Cortlandt Park Avenue, the designs. And I was just wondering, I don't know if it was in the study, maybe I missed it, but is there a particular design that you think, or that the study concluded would be best suited to, let's say, prevent ATVs and encourage pedestrian access? I know one of them had like a series of bollards. Another design, I think, was a gate. But was there any particular design that worked best?
So the answer is no, because the study did not get into that granularity. The study was not intended on proposing any design, but simply to kind of like review the wishes and the concerns of the community. If this was something that the city would want to take, usually New York City also do those designs themselves. I will say that, again, based on input that we got from the community, both in the Bronx and in Yonkers, it was pretty clear that any access point should also prevent illegal activity. And so if you ask me, and we wanted to present some best practices, different designs, so people could, get inspired and understand what we're talking about. So yeah, if you ask me, I hope to see there one day an entrance that really celebrates the unique nature of a forever wild forest, and that educates the community on what that is, and that allows for pedestrian access, as long as that is the only, as long as there are no trails that are designated for bicycle access.
Thanks.
Thank you, Bob Bender.
Thanks, Deb, and Oded, thank you. It's nice to see you again. I appreciate that you took some of our comments back and modified the plan from what we saw earlier. I'm very happy to see that bicycles have been eliminated from the plan. That's the right move, and I'm very glad you did that. A couple of things. you know, there, as you mentioned, there are already two entrances to the park from Carroll Avenue, one at Van Cortlandt Avenue and one at Saratoga. If we make the one at Van Cortlandt Avenue more welcoming, but still intended only for pedestrians, would you, and maybe this is a question for Stephanie, not for you, but would that close off the entrance at Saratoga Avenue? Which I think, you know, is it doesn't serve any purpose if Van Cortlandt Avenue is going to be the entry point from Carroll Avenue and South Yonkers into the park. So that's one question, you know, what's the future of Saratoga Avenue? And, you know, I think it would be a good idea to close it off. I do completely endorse the idea of trying to make the park look a little more welcoming to people in Yonkers, because first of all, they live closer to the park than anybody else. They don't have to cross any streets if they're on the south side of Carroll Avenue. The park is literally their backyard. But right now, there's the biggest trash problem in Van Cortlandt Park is right along that area where those entrances are, particularly at Saratoga. And, you know, it would be great to see the people who live along there take some sense of ownership of the park. It might start to diminish the trash problem that we have all the way up at the north end of the park right there. You mentioned there is a considerable difference in elevation between Van Cortlandt Avenue and the bridle path, the equestrian path. If there's going to be some connection there, I would want it to be as park friendly as possible, meaning, you know, no paving, no granite steps, nothing of that sort. I don't think it's really an ADA issue, because although the equestrian trail itself might be ADA compliant, once you get down to the south end where you reach Mosholu Avenue, as you know, there's a very steep decline, which is definitely not within the ADA guidelines, much too steep. So, you know, whatever happens to connect the Van Cortlandt Avenue entrance to the equestrian path does not have to be ADA accessible, I would think, because ultimately the path itself is not going to be ADA accessible. Those are my major concerns. You know, as I say, I'm grateful to you for taking the bicycles out of the equation, making this pedestrian only. But I do want to know what happens to Saratoga Avenue and what sort of connection you envision between the Van Cortlandt Avenue access point and the equestrian path, the old railroad spur.
Thank you, Bob. So yeah, all I could say is that is again another thing that the study does not focus on. I do agree with you generally that the situation as it is right now is not great, with two fences, with an official access point, with the New York City Parks sign next to them, but that those official access points look more like a crack in the fence that is overgrown, and that if the Van Cortlandt Park Avenue access point were to be improved, definitely I don't see any point in keeping the Saratoga Avenue one. But that is again something for New York City Parks Department to determine. When it comes to the access point, you're absolutely right. To the connection between Van Cortlandt Park Avenue and the bridle path, you're right, it is not an ADA compliance issue. When we reviewed any feasibility for an ADA connection, we soon realized that it's not even about paving, because there are other materials you could use. It's just about the different elevations and the steep slope in the south end of the bridle path, and that is why We reached out to the funding agency, to New York State Parks, and we explained to them that instead of going for an ADA compliant route, we're going to provide recommendations for feasible ADA accessible alternatives where people, wheelchair users or people with walking disabilities could get a little taste of the Northwest Forest, and the only place we found that to be feasible is right along Kelly Field. When it comes to that connection, yeah, I see that as a set of stairs. Eventually, that is also the main recommendation of the report. When it comes to what those stairs would look like, that is not resolution that the study goes down to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. David Gelman.
Yes, thank you. In the same vein, and I think you were aware of this, you know, we were dismayed to find out, you know, the terrible problems that happened with the trails on the Van Cortlandt, I'm sorry, on the Putnam. And to some degree, these trails are going to have to be somewhat ADA compliant, if nothing else, in a minimum 30 or 36-inch width to accommodate people. And we have learned that that is where we have huge problems with motorized vehicles. So I just want to underscore that for your planning efforts into the future. I think we missed it on the Putnam Trail, and I think we got to, you know, make sure that it doesn't get replicated. That problem doesn't get replicated here. But overall, I think, you know, I think you're on the right path. No pun intended.
Thank you. And yes, just to clarify, that path that along Kelly Field that is recommended, we're talking about an in and out ADA compliant path, and simply because as you go into the forest along south of Kelly Field, you're soon hitting a wetland section that is pretty much the biggest challenge when you're trying to make it accessible for anything other than walking. And so again, to address the requirements that we had for looking at ADA compliance, that was the only feasible alternative that we identified.
Oh, great. Are there any board members, Community Board 8 members who have questions? Anybody? Laura, is that you trying to find the mute button? You're unmuted.
Yeah, okay, I unmuted. Well, I have a concern about when we talk about improving access points, because improving access points to me indicates opening that access point, and opening that will have what we call unintended consequences, because it will allow bikes and other utility vehicles, you know, into the Northwest Woods. I understand when you say we're not having any bike trails through the Northwest Woods, but the bugaboo is the access points. I just don't know how that would be monitored. While you know, what David said about ADA on the Putnam, we have learned that you can't place boulders in such and such a position, juxtaposed to each other, because it's not ADA. We've been hearing this for years. And so I don't understand how that wouldn't become an issue when you seek those improvements you speak of at the access points. So that is a big concern.
So I would say that I could take your argument and reply to it by saying that leaving the access points as they are right now also comes with a lot of unintended consequences. And those unintended consequences are that right now, bicycle could access the park. And right now, we're aware of the fact that that section of the park feels oftentimes abandoned, not enough eyes on the trails, not enough positive activity to keep negative activity away, which results in trash along the border, in illegal dumping. And so I think that that is partially, not completely, but partially also an unintended consequence of the existing condition. Now, when it comes to how to prevent those unwanted uses, there are multiple design ways to do that. You know, it could be from anything like bollards or boulders to also, you know, putting a fence around that Gateway Park with a gate in that fence that only allows pedestrians and that cyclists can't go through. So there are different design ways. They are included in the report. They were included in the community engagement work that we've done there. It is important for me to mention that this that the opinion that you provided here is something that we heard from people on both sides of the border, including Yonkers residents that wish to see an improvement to that access point for pedestrians. So when it comes to selecting the exact design, I really hope, my hope is that we will meet here again sooner rather than later to discuss that design if this was a priority for New York City Parks Department.
Odette, allow me just to say that I'm in that park almost every week, and I use the equestrian trail. It is very, very pristine, except when you get to the Yonkers point. I used to be a volunteer. I picked up trash. There's a wall there at the Yonkers border, and obviously people congregate and they seem to be throwing the garbage off. And in that spot, there is garbage. The rest of it is very pristine. We think it's just beautiful. I do see occasional bikes in the Northwest Woods on the equestrian trail, but it is not an issue. It is not a problem like elsewhere in the park where it's a growing problem. Where you see something that looks maybe abandoned, we see just rustic beauty. So, you know, to try to keep that, yes, there are unintended consequences right now, maybe some of that trash. And we do want to beautify, I understand that, but we don't want to create a problem where we don't have problems. And so we'll all be very interested to see how you are going to keep the bicycles out. And I hope that we, you know, the ATVs and everything else, and I hope that we could use what's in your plan on the Putnam and elsewhere in the park. Might be very, very useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura. Chris Rizzo, you got your hand up.
Hi, thank you. I want to thank Groundwork Hudson Valley for this amazing feasibility study and all the efforts that have gone into it. Your work in Southwest Yonkers is so impressive, and I can't wait to see that Greenway come to Van Cortlandt Park. But the million-dollar question is, how do you make sure that Greenway doesn't become a dead end at the Riverdale City line? And so I strongly support the recommendations of the feasibility study to create better and new entrances into the park. To be frank, the Northwest Woods is pristine in most locations, but it's also really scary. I run in there regularly, and I am usually the only person there. If I were a female or a person that was a little bit more skittish, I'd be terrified. And often when I do see users in this part of the park, I see them on motorbikes or unsavory characters. So in my view, opening up as many beautiful, well-maintained entrances into the park from Riverdale, from other neighborhoods, from Yonkers is the name of the game. I am worried about design solutions on these entrances in a way that discourages bad users, motorbikes, bikes, etc. So I do share some of the community concerns. So the design process is going to be really, really important. But getting these entrances open and built and beautified is really fundamentally important. If you go to the entrances now at Saratoga, Carroll, and Van Cortlandt Avenue South, bad users can already get in on their bikes, on their motorbikes, by foot, you name it. It's only the good users that are being kept out by the scary and derelict conditions that are there. So I'm actually disagree with some of the people who have commented. I would love to see entrances at Carroll, Saratoga, and Van Cortlandt if there were enough money to design them and engineer them and maintain them properly, of course. So, in sum, I think it's a really great plan. I encourage you to reach out to the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance and the Riverdale Main Streets Alliance to get their feedback. I know both of them have been supportive of this in the past, including a letter from the Riverdale Main Streets Alliance in July 2021 in strong support of the feasibility study. So, I think you should solicit more formal feedback from those two organizations as well. One question as I conclude, sorry to take too much time. The money that Yonkers has and that Groundworks has for this project, just clarify there, none of it can be spent to create entrances into the park at this point. So all of what we're talking about is currently unfunded, right?
Correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So the only thing we use that money to actually do something on the ground is to remove have our youth program work together with the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance youth program to do cleanups and remove invasive species from that section. Other than that, again, the study, that's the result of this project. The study, the community engagement process that helped to develop it. And I appreciate the support of the Riverdale Main Street Alliance, and of course the wonderful support we got from the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance and guidance on this. And I will say that I can't tell you now what's going to happen with this feasibility study in the future. This is a lot of it is going to be depending on the decision that the New York City Parks Department will take. And I also understand that, for us as a Yonkers-based organization, we see it as an important connection and access issue for the residents of Southwest Yonkers. But we also understand that this park is in New York City Parks Department jurisdiction. And that there are other organizations working in that area that could work on such projects. But as long as we at Groundwork Hudson Valley are involved with this project and with improving access and circulation for pedestrians through the Northwest Forest, I guarantee that it will be a transparent process, and I can assure you that we will make sure that community voices are heard and taken into account.
Thank you.
And as you saw in this project, we take those concerns seriously and we really address them in our work.
Thank you, Oded. I just want to say Debbie Dolan and Matt Turo requested to speak before the meeting. I just want to make sure I don't know if they're still on, if they still want to speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
Deb, did Karen Argenti finish her comments?
Oh, I don't know if she's spoken yet.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Thank you.
Debbie and Matthew?
Yes, good evening, and thank you, Chair Travis, for the opportunity. My name is Debbie Dolan. I'm the Conservation Chair at Hudson River Audubon Society and one of the vital volunteers at Van Cortlandt Park since its inception. Along with my husband, Matthew Turov, We are stewards of the Cass Gallagher Trail and do at least monthly maintenance, removing trash, invasive plant species, and other trail maintenance. We're also two of the founding members of the nature group of Van Cortlandt Park, and I've been leading nature walks monthly in Van Cortlandt Park for 10 years, and since the pandemic, twice a month. We were present along with other Riverdale residents at the 2019 meeting with Groundworks. I'm very concerned that Groundworks is giving lip service to our natural areas in their proposal. They claim to have a constituency. Wasn't that the purpose of the skewed survey they posted at the Yonkers entrances to Van Cortlandt Park? They are asking to sacrifice trees and make a bike connection. See pages 28 and 32 of their proposal. I don't know when this was abandoned, but it's right there in the proposal to connect Van Cortlandt Park with the Putnam Greenway when there's already a dedicated bike lane on Broadway and a paved Putnam Trail that connects to the South County Trailway. The Northwest Forest is a sensitive natural area with wetlands and ephemeral wildflowers, and as the signage indicates, is an important birding area. It was named for a Bronx naturalist, Cass Gallagher, a longtime resident and steward. Groundwork calls it in its report the Cyan Trail, erasing the salient historical context. Any cycling would result in major impacts and ground disturbance. The bridle path is within the Northwest Forest, which is in the Groundworks proposal route and should be totally off limits to cyclists. Pedestrians should be able to appreciate nature without cyclists, e-bikes, motorbikes concerns. They have already encroached on Northwest Forest trails despite prohibitive signage at Yonkers entrances. I have sent photos to the board and Van Cortlandt Park's personnel, and probably Stephanie is sick of seeing all the photographs. She has other things to do, and I've held back. Despite no bicycling signs, this problem persists. The no bicycle sign, along with a section of the fence, was hung on and vandalized and removed, and both the fencing and signage were replaced. Enough is enough. Hands off the nature trails. Yonkers has the South County Trailway and Broadway access for cyclists already. There aren't enough PEP officers to keep ATVs and bikes off nature trails. Enforcement is lacking to ensure safety. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Jody Cologne.
Thank you. I was glad to hear, Oded, that you did listen to our comments about the uniqueness of Forever Wild spots, because we had talked about lights and paving the last time. So that was very encouraging. I'm also encouraged to hear that you've come to the conclusion that bikes shouldn't be on the wooded paths, which is part of the Forever Wild rules as it is. I'm still plowing through the 300 pages of addenda, but I'm sure I'll have more questions after that. And I just, I appreciate that you came back and did start with what was concerning to most of us. I was also glad to hear Chris Risso say that he doesn't believe that bikes should be on that part of the trail too, because in the report, it did mention that the Main Street Alliance was advocating for bikes on the bridle path. So I just want to make a slight correction is, I don't think we want to prevent, I think we want to have pedestrian only spaces, which are really important. As some of us are aging, it's a little scary to be on a shared path and have somebody zipping by you faster than you can react. So I'm glad that you are designating this as it is pedestrian only spaces, which I think are really important to people's enjoyment. And as a super steward for Shorefront Park, which is a Forever Wild area, when those entrance designs are looked at, the bollards, the first thing I thought of was too low, trucks will dump. And I see other people nodding and smiling. And also like, oh, fences, the vines are going to cover them again. And I think that's the most scary part of the entrances right now, is you can't see what you're walking into. You don't know who is behind there because of the vines. So I think those in the design stage, as was mentioned by Chris, that will be really important to think through all those design things so we don't end up with a vine covered entrance again. So, so thank you for the presentation and all the work that went into the report and the addenda. And I'll certainly contact you if I have more questions about that. But we certainly appreciate you hearing what we said last time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Good comments. Betty Clark. Or maybe it's
Yes,
Beth Clark.
hi. Yeah,
Okay.
it's Betty. That's right. Thanks.
Oh, okay.
So I am also a vital volunteer, and that part of the trail from Van Cortlandt, the end of Van Cortlandt Avenue, is actually my trail to look after with garbage and things like that. And I'm a Yonkers resident, and I actually live kind of at the very top of Van Cortlandt Avenue. That my access to the park is always through that entrance. I kind of disagree. I'm a runner, also and a walker, and I've actually never seen scary things at that end of the park. I see scarier things with loiterers closer to the bathrooms and closer to the central parts of Van Cortlandt than at that entrance. I see dog walkers, I see runners. I'm not afraid to run there alone. But you know, I took it upon myself a long time ago to contact the Yonkers City Councilwoman about the garbage that was happening right outside the park, right there. And they put in a trash can for a while, and that made a big difference, but then they removed it again. I don't know why. But the accumulation of trash right at the beginning of that trail can be better managed, I really believe, by having more trash receptacles. Now, I guess maybe the part, it's a Yonkers kind of city issue about whether they're willing to do that and empty them. I've even found by putting bags at that entrance, which I've done myself, that people then don't throw trash all over the ground. So speaking about the vines, I don't think that makes it scary. Actually, Benny Baraz, who's also on this call, has helped me clean those vines away during the summer months, especially because they block the signs that say no dumping and no parking, which people can't see at that time. There are ways to maintain that. I think I want to go back to what Laura Spalter was saying, and also Deb. These are nature trails, and we don't need to do a lot. I mean, in terms of improving them, I think it is critical that we do not encourage more bikes or bikes, but I don't see bikes entering the park right there. I see them entering from many other places. So I'm just saying this as an observer and as a volunteer in that area, and I spend a lot of time at that end of the park. I too feel that we need to preserve as much of this as a real nature trail, and you know, the opening up part of it. And I don't see how you put a gate or anything that, you know, that isn't accessible to bikers. That's also just accessible to you. Yes, you can block the ATVs, but you can't necessarily block the bikes. So I'm sort of disagreeing a little bit about this being a scary part of the park and all of that. And I'm agreeing we need to do something about the trash. That's really the big thing. In talking and working with some of the other volunteers and with John, there were ideas. One of the areas right there where there's a dead tree when you enter the park at that point was a party area. I used to pick up many, many, many beer bottles from that area. And there was even a bar stool, which I removed, and then people sit there all the time. So there are things we can do at that end of the park to reduce the not so good use of the park. And that's all I want to say.
Well, great. Thank you so much. It was really good. That was good detail to provide. We really appreciate you coming on the call. So we have, with hands up, we have Rob Spalter, Robert Fanuzzi, Kevin Kane, and Karen Argenti. So I'm going to cut off comments at that with Karen because it's getting a little bit late, just in the interest of time. So Rob Spalter, you're next.
Hi. One of the things that in the feasibility study that I think should have been studied was the enforcement part. Because for over 40 years dealing with the 5-0 and trying to get their resources in North Riverdale, it's always explained to me that's the end of the district. They're not inclined to send their people up to the North Riverdale because it takes too long to get back to South Riverdale. And likewise in Yonkers, that's the end of the Yonkers route. So unless there's some kind of a new influx of PEP people that can work 24 hours a day to police this, which is the only thing that's gonna keep people out. It's not, you know, we all read the newspapers. We know that something happens and somebody says something and they get attacked. You know, we don't need to go into all the details. So you need actually real police to make it safe. Not you know, somebody walking a dog saying, "Oh, you shouldn't do that." You know, this is New York in 2022, and you know, I'm too old. I wouldn't do that. But anyway, so that the enforcement aspect of it, I think, is very significant, and I think it should be part of a feasibility study of how you're going to maintain this in terms of safety. You know, yeah, you have the Putnam Trail, and it's the Wild West for usage now, and so that's my story. Anyway.
All right, great, thanks, Rob. Bob Benizzi. Bob, are you there? All right, we assume Bob's just stepped away from his computer for a minute. Kevin Kane, would you like to go? You're muted.
There you go. Here I am.
There you go.
You know, I live I'm in North Riverdale, above the park at 260, 2 or 3 blocks above. I spend a lot of time, particularly in that north part of the park. In 25 years, I've never seen a single bike there. And it seems like, you know, I wouldn't want to see bikes or motorcycles or the little scooters kids ride. But there's access from, you know, any of the ball fields. It'd be easy to scoot in right now. I also think that garbage cans would help up there. That part of the park is, you know, largely left alone. But the last gentleman who spoke said, how are we going to keep people out? I think the whole point of this project is to invite people to come in. I don't see enough people out there who would probably really be nurtured and enjoy what I use a lot. And so, you know, it'd be nice to have a little bit of Wild West out there where, you know, it's not regulated and it doesn't need to be. It doesn't seem to me. I've been walking that, you know, at least 2 or 3 times a month for 23, 24 years and have never had any time that I was nervous out there. And I think that I would also, my last point, I would like the access to Yonkers. I ride my bike to Top Tomato and down Broadway, and it's scary. That's a crowded, busy road. And I would love to have access to walk or ride a bike all the way down to downtown Yonkers and get across to the river. It sounds like a wonderful project to me. And I would support it wholeheartedly to have that opened up. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I realize we have Captain Bayron from the PEP for North Bronx. Would you like to comment at all on the safety in the Northwest Forest? I don't mean to put you on the spot. Maybe you've also.
No, I'm just listening in to hear the concerns and all that. You know, we have a mounted unit that patrols Van Cortlandt Park also. They do the Putnam trails. They try as best as possible to be in the areas where it's most busy. And then we have a borough unit that goes there almost on a daily basis. You know, they patrol the entire park. So the time span that it gets them to get from one end to the other, it might be a little lengthy because, you know, they go to Broadway or they'll try going to the trails. But every effort is made to patrol the entirety of the park. And they're right, we do not have a lot of officers. I can't dedicate a unit there, you know, 7 days a week, 16 hours a day. It's very, very difficult for us because we have other Blackstreet Park patrol. But, you know, I am listening to the concerns and I am taking note of that.
Captain, do you find that the Northwest Forest, in considering just Van Cortlandt Park, would you consider that one of the more dangerous parts of the park? Or like, if you had to rank it, would you consider it particularly dangerous?
We haven't received much complaints. You know, we go based on the complaints that we get. Okay. You know, We have been getting complaints about, weirdos walking around and by the lawn area in the south, and we got complaints about the illegal barbecues and the amplified sound going on Broadway and stuff like that. So we'll direct our patrols to that area to try and curtail that type of activity.
Okay. Great, thank you. I appreciate it. Bob Fanuzzi, you
Yeah,
there?
Deb, I'm so thankful for coming back to me. So everybody, I am giving some initial responses from as a board member of Bronx Council Environmental Quality, and I'm joined by my board member colleague Karen Argenti. And I'm just going to say three things that Bronx Council Environmental Quality has really tried to bring to greenway planning. And first is that we really are committed to greenways and to letting greenway planning and design supplement green infrastructure and stormwater management. We're deeply committed to minimizing any runoff that would occur from any feature in the park, especially, which brings so much groundwater and is responsible for so much, the source of flooding in our area. Just a second. Excuse me, Amanda. Secondly, so our commitment to non-pervious surfaces is absolute. We really would need to look further at the kinds of surfaces that are planned. Secondly, I wanted to say that we are deeply committed to maximizing access on streets to the existing access points that the city has invested in along the Broadway and Putnam and the old Croton Aqueduct Trail. So we really hope that in addition to looking at ways that people can access the park directly, that Yonkers commits itself to wayfinding that will enable people to use these existing portals, gateways into our beautiful park, rather than extending a street grid into the park. I'll let Karen talk about our long-term plans for Empire State designation for the Putnam Trail. But we also really are we have a Greenway committee. We're gonna take this under advisement and look carefully at it. I really thank you for your presentation. And we'll be issuing comment on it once our members get a chance to look carefully at the proposal. So at this point, I'm just gonna turn it over to Karen and then sign off.
Thank you, Bob. Karen.
Hi,
Thank you, Karen. Yeah.
Hi, okay, hi. So Bob said that our Greenway Committee is going to take a look at it. We've been looking at greenways and looking at alternative ways. It is not uncommon for greenways not to be connected or disconnected at like several different points. And so we're working with the borough president, and there's master plan for greenways in the city of New York and a whole bunch of other things, which Bob will talk to you about. I'm the water person. So one of the things is that I think that this feasibility study hasn't gone far enough. I don't think that it has shown that this project is feasible at this particular point. And I think that at some point, the community board should consider a resolution talking about the feasibility of it. I think they should be looking at other alternatives, like connecting to the Putnam Trail, which allows access to people from Westchester, including Yonkers, and also the old Croton Aqueduct. And if you do that, then you preserve the right of us to not have any more impervious surface along in the park, which just creates more runoff, which creates, overflow of our sewers, and on and on and on. And the other thing is that we already are absorbing all of the 65% of the runoff that goes into the lake and the pond and everything else is coming from Westchester County. And so let's just focus on making sure that we don't have any polluted rain traveling off on a hard surface and increasing them. and try to use the areas that we already have open to the people of Westchester. I'd like to also, let me put my glasses on so I can see my notes. We submitted statement, but we'll update it because we are going to have a couple of meetings and we'll give you a better way. So I think there are two ways to get into Van Cortlandt Park plus Broadway, and that the importance of when they finished the Putnam Greenway in Van Cortlandt Park, half of it or 3/4 of it, that was immediately designated as the Empire State Trail, which runs from Albany straight down to that point. And then, like the other greenways that are disconnected, it disconnectedly goes through the streets and meanders right, left, up and down till it gets into Manhattan, goes across the Broadway Bridge into Manhattan. So we would like to have that continued in the CSX property, which Deb talked about, how that's going to finally be purchased by the city of New York, and will be created a wonderful greenway, and that will continue in the park and then outside the park at the CSX property. And then we're fighting to make sure that we can get other access points for people in the city of New York. And so it's really critical that about this project in terms of, you know, economy, equity, and environmentalism. And if at this particular point, I think that if they want to do stuff and make a connection, they have to look a little bit further in Yonkers in order to come in. Breaking up and making too many exits into the park is not going to get us anywhere. And you certainly don't want to make a straight line going down that repeats what was done a really long time ago with the angle off, the break off of the Putnam Trail. And also just to note, they ended up ending up with the Putnam Trail and they didn't have to purchase it. And we in the city, we had to purchase it. We had to wait until somebody gave us an okay to get there. They've been in control of that piece of land all this time. And I think we just need another look, and that this feasibility study is not complete. I'm totally against it. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Odette, is there anything you wanted to, did you want to respond to any of that at all? Any of the previous comments?
Well, just to the last comment, I do want to clarify that this report does not call for any addition of impervious surface or paving in Van Cortlandt Park, and it does address. I just, while we were speaking, I tried to find it, but I didn't get to it. It does address the when it looks at feasibility of bicycle connection, and it determines that there is no such feasibility in the Northwest Forest. There is a map that shows the other potential bicycle connections to Van Cortlandt Park, and it does look at the Putnam path in that essence, recommending the McLean Avenue McLean Avenue as an on-street option to connect the Yonkers Greenway to the Putnam Trail. So again, the reason why we concluded that there is no such feasibility in Northwest Forest has to do with the input from the community, the physical condition, and the pure fact that currently there are no trails that are designated for bicycle activity in the Northwest Forest, and therefore there's no point in even considering such access. I do hope to see, as someone who cares a lot about the Yonkers Greenway, I do hope to see the city of Yonkers work together with New York City Department of Transportation and with New York City Parks Department to explore additional alternatives for integrating the future Yonkers Greenway into the greater Greenway network through what seems like would be mostly on-street infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you, Oded. Yeah, I agree. Like, I think that the Putnam is a missed opportunity to connect to the Yonkers Greenway, and that there must be a way to do it. Even if it means that, I don't know, widening of streets or reducing parking or relaning, reallocating how roadways are assigned so that you can actually get safely from, it's probably along McLean Avenue, but get safely even between the Broadway bike lane and the Putnam. Would open up a lot of additional options for folks to get south, because then you can get to 242nd Street on the Putnam, which is really where the bikes are supposed to be. So yeah, I want to amplify what Karen is saying about taking advantage of the Putnam as an existing bike path that connects both north and south, and ultimately will go to Manhattan all the way smoothly, hopefully, and we'll get it off of some of the more dangerous surface areas in the Bronx and in New York. So to pull it back into the committee, thank you so much, Oded, for answering all of our questions and making your presentation. For the committee, as a follow-up item to this, I would like to propose that when we talk about capital and expense budget in January, that we talk about where we want to, things like entrances on the Yonkers border, and both formulate exactly what our ask would be, what our requirements would be to limit them, but also to put them in terms of priorities of other capital projects that we have for the community board, so that we can, have a good cohesive discussion. Because I support the idea of having, good connections at the Yonkers border. I agree that I think it would make it feel safer. It would make it feel more welcoming. But there's also other parts of the park, for example, like Bailey Avenue on the south end of the park, that also needs some additional capital work to make it feel more welcoming so that people can get inside. So I don't think it's a but. I think it's an and, but it's an and over time. And how do you which things do you do first? So I want to talk to the committee to see if the committee supported this approach to kind of putting a pin in some of these ideas. I think they've been interesting, and then having a more full discussion in January, February, when we talk about expense and capital items.
Well, thank you everyone for again providing the time to present this project, and for all the input you provided. And if you do end up putting that into additional comments to the final report into writing, I will make sure to document that and to attach it to the report when we go with it to the New York City Parks Department, so that your concerns are also part of the discussion, the follow-up discussion.
Oded, what is your time frame for going to the Parks Department?
So we still don't have anything scheduled. We just had a preliminary discussion with the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance about that. We're probably, just given our organizational timeline, we're probably looking at sometimes in the winter that we'll try and get that meeting.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you again. I guess we will move on to the next topic on the agenda, which is a discussion of dedicated Parks Enforcement Patrol, or a dedicated Parks Enforcement Patrol command in Van Cortlandt Park. This discussion is actually coming out of a letter that was sent from Assembly Member Jeffrey Denowitz's office and Council Member Eric Denowitz's office. And it's a very short letter, so I'm just going to read it really quickly. It says, we are writing to this is to Margaret Nelson, the Deputy Commissioner of Urban Park Service and Public Programs at the Arsenal. It says, we are writing to you regarding a need for increased Parks Enforcement Patrol capacity in Van Cortlandt Park, and to urge you to establish a new permanent PEP command in the park. Van Cortlandt Park is the third largest park in New York City, with nearly 1,200 acres of public space that's used by nearly 3 million visitors each year and growing. The park is technically contained within the 50th precinct of the NYPD, despite being segmented by several highways, which make it functionally difficult to reliably patrol the eastern side of the park. Adding to the public safety enforcement complexity is the fact that there are 3 different NYPD precincts bordering the park, in addition to the Yonkers Police Department along the northern perimeter. The above challenges have resulted in significant shortfalls of public safety in Van Cortlandt Park, particularly in recent years. The current PEP schedule does not cover nighttime hours, which is when several shootings have occurred in the Chandler Field area. This is also the time when many neighbors complain about excessive noise from ad hoc parties that continue late into the night from all parts of the park. The establishment of a dedicated PEP command in Van Cortlandt Park would bring this vital asset for the Bronx into a level of safety resources commensurate with Prospect Park and Central Park, the latter of which has its own NYPD precinct beyond mere PEP enforcement. Van Cortlandt Park has long been a much needed refuge for Bronxites looking to escape from the noise and commotion of our great city, and it's imperative that the Parks Department support this park with the safety resources we need to keep our community safe. Thank you for your attention to this matter, and please contact us with any further discussions or any further questions. So I wanted to, I think that it sounds like a phenomenal idea. I wanted to ask the Assembly member, his office to come, and Stephanie Ehrlich to come to just speak to kind of the background and context of that letter, and why you decided to have a PEP command instead of a police precinct. Stephanie, do you want to take the lead, or I think Frederick's still on the call, right?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, Frederick.
You've disappeared from my screen. Okay.
So I would like to just say, first and foremost, we have 2 PEP captains here on the call. We have Captain Sanchez and Captain Bayron, both of whom are incredibly devoted to Van Cortlandt Park. And, you know, the number of PEP officers in the borough is shocking. What do we have on paper? 66 PEP officers?
Actually, no, we actually have 51 right now.
So 51 for the whole borough. So that's over 100 parks assets throughout the whole borough. And you have to think there's 2 shifts per day, 7 days a week. That doesn't leave a lot of PEP officers for any one park, let alone Van Cortlandt Park, which is huge. We are almost 1,200 acres. So, but I will say that our PEP captains are always very available and try really hard to help us out no matter what. But that said, it's just physically not possible for them to be in all of the places that they're needed. And so just a few things that have happened recently. We have had shootings at Chandler. We had a stabbing recently on the Broadway side that wound up at the mobile station. We had an attack on staff. We have had threats to staff and visitors. We just last night, 2 nights ago, had a break-in at Mosholu Golf. That's the 3rd time this year. Van Cortlandt Golf has been broken into as well. So there's a lot of issues within the park that really need some more attention. I think starting with a PEP command would be the best place to begin. We look at the different kinds of violations as crimes against humanity and crimes against the park. We can start with crimes against the park with PEP and having a command that would be a physical place in the park where they are based. And if we were able to fund it, it would be great if there were an overnight shift, because that is when things happen. And our PEP officers work really, really well with NYPD. So, if we did not have NYPD in the park, they would be our conduit to NYPD. Did I miss anything, captains?
No, you hit it right in the head. In a perfect world, I would love to have NYPD and PEP to be right at Van Cortlandt Park. I know in the agenda, the community board wanted to know the difference between a NYPD command and a PEP command. And actually, there's a couple of differences between a PEP command and an NYPD command. An NYPD command has a holding cell. They 24-hour patrol, and they also process arrests in an NYPD command. In a PEP command, we don't have a holding cell. We don't have a 24-hour PEP patrol. Our patrol ends at 11 p.m. Then after that, NYPD takes over Van Cortlandt Park because we're no longer patrolling after 11 p.m. Also, we don't have we don't process arrests at a PEP command. When PEP makes an arrest, we have to go to the 50th precinct to process our arrests. Working in Central Park for 8 years, it made a big difference when you had NYPD and PEP inside the park. You have NYPD that took care of the major crimes in Central Park. You have PEP that took care of the quality of life issues in Central Park, meaning unleashed dogs, drinking inside the park, curfew individuals that's inside the park after hours. So those are the two differences between Parks Enforcement and NYPD. But us joining forces together, we were able to make a lot of difference in Central Park. And I guess us being in Van Cortlandt Park will almost be the same thing, but like I said, in a perfect world, because right now, we are losing a lot of PEP officers to NYPD, to corrections, and to Department of Sanitation. We actually lost one officer. He was on LOA. He just put in his resignation form. We also lost another officer a couple of days ago. So the sooner they come in, the sooner they leave once an NYPD exam or correction officer exam comes out.
So can PEP issue traffic citations? I know that, the bus traffic and stuff is a concern along Broadway.
Yes, we could issue all summonses. We issue criminal court summonses, moving violations, oath summonses, as well as parking violations.
And then if there were a PEP command, what kind of changes could we expect in terms of coverage, and how many officers how many officers are a command?
In each command, we'll probably have at least 11 to 12 officers, 11 to 12 officers per tour. And we will be on site. The officers will be on site instead of having park goers calling Central Communication and the officers coming from Pelham Bay. And it's taking us 15, 20 minutes because of traffic, or even more at times. You will actually have an officer right there at Van Cortlandt Park, which will be there in seconds. But because officers are coming out of Pelham Bay and as well as Mill Pond Command, it's taking us 15, 20 minutes to get to Van Cortlandt Park to address conditions.
So if the Parks Department were to approve a command in Van Cortlandt Park, would that take officers from another part of the city and bring them to, or would this be net new?
It would actually be new officers going into the command. When an academy comes in, those officers will come out of the academy and go into the new command.
Also, there's a question about a facility. These officers need an area like an office with computers and locker rooms. We have to have, male, female locker rooms, a break room where they can go and take a break to have lunch or to do their paperwork, to process the summonses, to answer emails, and phone contact with all the other commands. An area that's secure, because at one point when we'll leave at 11 p.m., then people, we can't just have them somewhere out in the park in a building that is not going to support their needs.
So do you have a place already in mind in Van Cortlandt Park where these officers would have office space and locker rooms and be able to change and have lunch and such?
Not at all. Not at all. I don't have a location. We haven't looked to a location up there. With regards to, I know there is a section north where the gas pumps are. I'm not sure, but I think it's shared by DOT and the Parks Department. I'm not sure if there is space there to put maybe even possibly a trailer, a double wide trailer, to access that point. And these officers need a private bathroom. They can't use the public bathroom because of the equipment that they're wearing, and the possibility of having them to have to take off their equipment, and they can't. that just can't happen in a public bathroom. So that also needs to be included in a location. It is easier if they're working out of Van Cortlandt, like the other captain said. Sometimes it's 20 minutes, sometimes it could be 45 minutes. On a hot summer day, on a Saturday, they're coming from Pelham Bay or Orchard Beach. It takes them quite a while to get over there, especially in the night tour when they're handling the conditions for the barbecues and all that. And then when they leave, they get called back, or they'll have to go to Mashula Parkway. Alan Chandler is very, very busy for us. There's always complaints about illegal parking and the loud music and the barbecuing and the drinking. So, to adjust barbecue conditions is not 5 minutes. It's 15, 20 minutes because you have to address, now they get surrounded. People want to tell you, oh, we've been doing this for 25 years. Oh, why are you picking on us? There's a lot of issues.
Yeah.
Now, my command currently has 3 supervisors and 7 officers for both tours. That's it. I used to have 10 officers per tour at one point. So the one unit you have patrolling Van Cortlandt Park also has to hit Pelham Bay, Mashula Parkway, and all those other northern areas, Seton Falls Park, all those northern areas. And that's time consuming, and they're on 8-hour shifts.
So when you said 11 to 12 hours per tour, is a tour a shift?
I mean,
is it
11 to 12 officers. I'm sorry. Yes, a tour is a shift is usually 8 hours. The tour is 8 hours.
So you're thinking 11 to 12 hours per shift or just total?
11 to 12 officers per shift.
Per shift, okay.
8 hours.
Yeah. And then, I mean, maybe this is a question for Frederick and Stephanie, but in terms of timeline process, like this letter's going to the Parks Department. If the Parks Department were to say, yeah, that's a great idea tomorrow, how do you accommodate, what's the time frame or the process for kind of establishing what is needed in terms of capital needs and kind of building it out, allocating it, funding it, hiring, all that? What kind of time frame are we talking about here?
Yeah, you can go ahead for your experience. I can only really speak to what we would like to see. You might have some more insight on what
we should expect.
Yeah.
And first, give us the dream, Frederick. What would you like to see?
I mean, I would like to see some quick responses. The demonstration the Parks Department is interested in even considering it. I think I'd be interested in seeing an inventory of the existing infrastructure assets in the park. I know there's a couple structures that are already there. What's their capacity for added programs. I know that there has been previous discussion about there's a temporary golf house and a permanent golf house coming. I think there's a lot of room. I would like to see quickly the Parks Department turning around a list of what might be a feasible fit to host a command. And then I think we really do need to see when that PEP command class is going to come in. And then we really have to talk about, the city budget cycle that I think is due, was that July 1st is their fiscal year. So I think that's probably the most realistic is tying it to additional funding. But I would like to see the ball rolling as soon as possible. And I think, let's get some of these details worked out, in particular, where could it potentially go, and then getting feedback on where we would want it to go, whether do we need parking for the officers to get there? Do we need, obviously need bathrooms? Do we have existing bathrooms? Is there a place that would benefit the most from, if you put a new command somewhere to add bathrooms somewhere in the park? Are there, there's a lot of variables, and I think the Parks Department and probably Stephanie and our friends in the Alliance would really have some valuable insight into where, logistically where this can fit in, and then we can figure out the sort of the money and the people probably more aligned with the fiscal time year of the city.
Okay. And then as far as equipment, do they need horses? Is that how people are would be getting around, or is it ATVs or
vehicles? Definitely vehicles to go back and forth, and the need if there's an arrest made, just transportation wise, you will need a vehicle to transport them to the precinct. ATVs, you can't take a perpetrator on ATV, but definitely a 4x4 vehicle. We can provide, we can have these officers bike train and provide bikes for them. They can do bike patrols and the trails and all that other stuff. So, but definitely a vehicle is needed for that location.
But you're thinking like one 4x4 vehicle of some sort,
Depending on how many officers are going to be assigned to that area, you definitely need more than one vehicle. As you know, one vehicle used towards the day, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. Eventually, the vehicle is going to give way, and we're going to be back on foot again. So, the variables can be worked out depending on how much officers are going to be assigned there, plus supervisors and stuff like that.
Okay. All right. So I always want to open it up to the committee. Does the committee have any questions? Nope. Bob.
Sorry, I was a little slow to get to the raise hand function.
That's fine.
So this decision about whether to have a command in Van Cortlandt Park, this rests entirely with the Parks Department. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, but I would imagine there's also some fiscal implications that would require a little bit of support from the city council and the mayor.
Oh, no, I mean, that I was going to ask that as a separate question, but I mean, it's the Parks Department who has the jurisdiction here and makes the determination of whether to locate a command in the park. And yes, I mean, listening to the captain talk about vehicles and all that, so, you know, and a facility, et cetera, obviously there's going to be a significant capital issue associated with whether this command is established. You know, so I mean, I see that. I just want to be sure I understood the chain of command here, you know, about who makes the decision. The other thing that is a real concern here. I mean, let me say, first of all, hearing that, you know, we've got problems with barbecue and double parking, and hearing that they've got shootings over at Chandler, you know, we're sort of puts our problems in some perspective, not to minimize them, but, you know, fortunately, we don't have that problem on our side of the park. But the really fundamental problem here is that it's very hard to keep PEP officers. You know, whatever the number is on paper, that's never, in my experience, that's never the actual number of PEP officers. You know, they're always, as one of the captains said, they're always taking a test for the police department, corrections department, you know, any of the other agencies, because the benefits are better with those agencies than they are with PEP and with the Parks Department. And that, you know, that problem really has to be addressed, because it's, you know, it's a great idea to set up a command in the park. And I hope we can do it. I think it's a wonderful idea, it would be wonderful. But, you know, we start out with 10 officers, and then we've got 8 officers, and then, you know, we're waiting for a new class to come in. That, you know, that problem also has to be on the table, that whole problem of how do we retain PEP officers? So, you know, look, I'm 101% in favor of moving all this forward. I want to see it happen, but someday we've really got to confront the problem of retention in the Parks Enforcement Patrol. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
I would just add, Bob, that's not just, it's not just pertaining to PEP officers. That's everything at parks. All park workers leave for the other agencies. So we can't keep any of our staff because they get paid more at other agencies.
Jody.
Hi, I'm just gonna leave my video off because my battery's dying.
That's fine.
A couple of things, Bob, in addition to what you said, also the fact that PEP ends at 11 p.m. That's something definitely that can that be addressed before a command center is built or made or whatever? And then my second question is, even though it's kind of shocking to hear about what's happening at Chandler, but does having a command at Van Cortlandt shorten the time for responses in Spuyten Duyvil and the riverside of, in the summer, we do have some parties and vandalism, but when I call Central, they're like, it's like 45 minutes away. So would that help the other parks that are west of Van Cortlandt if there was a command center there?
Yes. It'll be a shorter time span to leave. The base will be out of Van Cortlandt Park. So
And then we
they'll
would
be
see you in Henry Hudson more. Thank you.
definitely Seton Falls Park, Seton Park, Spine Dival. That whole northern sector will be patrolled by the officers assigned to VC.
Great, thank you.
And Jody, I just would add, our sort of internal strategic choice here was we were thinking it'd be easier to get officers on overnight shifts and later shifts if there were a command out of Van Cortlandt Park, sort of a little bit of a chicken and the egg question, but I think our thought was that if we get a command established, it'll be much easier, because I think right now one of the issues, and our PEP captains maybe could speak to this a little more accurately, I would presume if somebody's has a tour that ends at 11 and all their stuff is in the East Bronx, you know, they got to leave before 11 to get back by the end so they can close their shift out. So I think our thought process would, if we get a command established first, it will make it a lot easier to then subsequently expand from there.
Okay, thanks.
That's correct.
Captain Sanchez, you got your hand up.
Yes. Yeah, that's correct. If we had a command at Van Cortlandt Park, they will leave right from there. So they will be leaving that command exactly at 11 p.m. I think if the agency itself did a hiring blitz for parks enforcement, I think we'll be able to do, and this is, like I said, this isn't a perfect world. We will be able to have this 24-hour shift, but the parks department is going to have to do a hiring blitz where we hire all these PEP officers, and and for us to have so many PEP officers that they say, we have a lot of PEP officers, so let's do a third shift, and it'll be like 11 or 12 a.m. to 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. or 11 to 7 a.m.
Does PEP have do the PEP officers have kind of outreach to youth to encourage young people to join the PEP patrol the way the NYPD does?
Yes, we have gone to colleges and handing out flyers, job fairs we have gone to, and we do get college students that do come aboard, but once these exams come out, they're gone. They're going to PD, they're going to corrections, they're going to other agencies.
Right. Okay. David Gelman.
Yes. Given that the parks close at dusk, so that's typically 2 to 4 hours earlier, 2 to 5 hours earlier than 11 o'clock. Do we have any statistics on incidents through the time of day? That is to say, how much of a problem is there after 11 o'clock? I mean, I'm not trying to minimize it, but my guess is that there aren't quite as many people in the park. And, probably most of those who are around are up to no good, but I'll bet you there aren't as many at that time of day. Do we have any statistics on that?
For the most part, it is the loud music, the partying along Broadway, Allen Chandler area after 11 p.m. When PEP is not on duty, the drinking and the cars doing the 360s and the burnouts and all that other stuff. We have responded early in the mornings around 6, 7 a.m. to Allen Chandler, where they're having a car show right in front of the cemetery. At one point, they had one unit that responded, and as they were clearing out the vehicles, the 4 tires of their patrol car were slashed, rendering them useless for right now. And then we had to call a tow truck as everybody drove away and laughed at them. Several other units responded from the south because we don't have that many officers. By that time, the culprits had driven off, and there wasn't much you can do but wait for a tow truck to get the vehicle towed. So we try to do our best.
No, I understand, and you are pointing out some pretty bad anecdotal evidence, but do you have any statistics?
David, I can
across the day.
I haven't run the numbers, but I would estimate 90 to 95% of the complaints we hear about Van Cortlandt Park, and again, our district goes around 3 sides of the park. We get Woodlawn. I mean, there's not too many people on the north side, but that does abut Van Cortlandt Village, and Riverdale, and Northern Kingsbridge. The complaints we get are about nighttime activity, people barbecuing, it's not so much the barbecue in the evening, it's that they go late into the night, the music gets louder. And Chandler Field is, I mean, that's been a problem spot for many years. It's a known problem spot. It's an enforcement black hole. There are organized parties. I've heard they advertise for them on Instagram. It's that the Chandler Field issue is a mess upon itself. But I would estimate of our constituent inquiries on this, 90 to 95% of the complaints about Van Cortlandt Park are nighttime, overnight.
Overnight. Okay.
Overnight, yeah, like between the hours of, I'd say 9, 10 p.m., between dusk and dawn.
Okay. Thank you.
So obviously this seems like a very, very good idea. So what can we do to support this? So like it sounds like in terms of capital allocations, priorities, letters of support, what do you need from us?
I think letters of support are a really important way to go. And it is more than anything, it is about money. So, but I think it's expense before capital, because I think that we could probably find a place to have PEP in Van Cortlandt Park without building something. So captains, if you want to come take a ride over, we can take a look at some of the locations that might be possible for you.
Are you thinking about the old Marshall Golf House?
It's a possibility, yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. And we've already got on one of our budget priorities, the sewer connection has certainly been there. And that with the FMC meeting too, that may be an opportunity to talk to all the right people at the right time. So I mean, I don't know if you were already doing that, but yeah, there should be a sewer connection to that building for sure. So
it keeps falling to the bottom of the list. So it'd be great to get it higher on the list.
Well, it's the nature of sewers, right? They fall to the bottom. Everything gets sorted out.
Didn't punch you at 9 o'clock then. I'm going to try to say this not politically. I think it's safe ground because I think the majority of our city council, our mayor, I think the majority of our city leadership has all expressed some level of support for increased park funding in the budget. I know that this year it wasn't exactly where people wanted it. I know that the Councilmember Deno, I can't speak for him, but I know that he was vocal on increased park funding. So I think to the extent that, and I know you guys do sort of capital needs, but to the extent that you guys can sort of remind everybody of our mutual support for parks funding, I think that would be helpful. I also think letters of support for the broader issue of a PEP command in Van Cortlandt Park would be helpful. And I would personally, and I think from our office's perspective, we would appreciate ideas and thoughts on locations where a PEP command might be feasible. Whether the temporary, quote unquote, temporary golf house is that's a good spot. If the new golf house that they're building would be a good spot. If I know there's a stadium that needs a lot of love. I think there's like a plant center and a stable up in the northern sort of middle sections. I think there's a lot of places that this could plug into. I think what we would be interested in is the feedback from park users as to where might be good or even probably more importantly as where might be too sensitive or unforeseen consequences of putting something there. So I think that would be the tangible feedback I would appreciate from this committee.
Okay. All right, duly noted. So we'll put together a letter to support support these efforts. That's wonderful. Is there anything else just to close this out? Oh, Rob, I see your hands up.
Hi, I just wanted to ask the captains, one of the things that I think has made these quality of life issues so difficult is that the city has decriminalized public urination. You can't do anything when people are in a park after hours, drinking, open containers, marijuana, all of this stuff that used to be a thing that if the police came, people would run away. Now it's like, what do you say when you go in there and people are doing this stuff? It boggles my mind. Anyway, I don't know that anything can be done about that. But
Rob, it actually did make it harder for us to do our jobs, but we're gonna continue to do our job. Yeah, yes, yeah, it did make it harder for us, and it's hard for us every single day when we do try to issue summonses or try to address these conditions.
Well, thank you. I want to thank all of you for having a really good discussion and really educating me and hopefully the rest of the committee and the public on what how you're approaching this, why you're approaching it this way, and what we can do to help. One last thing before you go is at the last meeting we discussed motorcycles and ATVs on the trails in Van Cortlandt Park. I think we left it with the 50th precinct was going to meet with PEP and the Alliance to discuss better enforcement. I just wanted to see if there was any update on or efforts made or wins or anything on that issue.
No, we did do several details with the 50th precinct over the summer. I don't have all the numbers, but I think it was a total of 5 scooters and dirt bikes that were seized. That we turned that between PD and PEP. PD handled the confiscation process of the vehicles. I don't know the total tally of how many summonses were issued, but the summertime is our busiest times, and we weren't able to continue doing it every weekend like we had planned. But we certainly will address that condition next year again.
And then Stephanie, is the Alliance going to do anything with the Putnam to make it more difficult for motorcyclists or bicyclists to, or really motorcyclists, e-bikes to go up and down the path quickly?
So that's something that we're still talking with Parks about, how that can, if there's anything we can do for signage, if there's anything we can do for reconfiguring things. A lot of this is stuff that we explored very early on in 2020 when it opened, and we were told a lot of no's, but we have some different people in place right now who I think might be more inclined to say yes. So we're working on it.
Continuing to ask. Okay, wonderful. Well, that concludes the discussion of the PEP command. Thank you all again. I'm going to move on to old business. Is there anybody who has anything for old business they'd like to bring up? David Gelman.
Yes. Is there anybody representing our district as a whole from the Parks Department here tonight? Usually it's Joe, and I see that he's not here tonight. Okay, I'll take that as a no. Because at the parks, and I don't know how to convey this to him. I don't know if this is something that you can do, Stephanie, or if I don't want to cross a bridge that's not appropriate. But back in August 26, Bob Bender and I in the budget discussions we brought up a couple of issues about things that are coming up or are occurring in the district. And I said that I wanted to get a report on them in the September and October meetings, and Joe has not been available to come to those meetings, but we need somebody from Parks to address those issues. Is this a message you can bring to Parks, Stephanie, or is this not your domain?
I don't think we should use Stephanie as our messenger. We should just, David, if you want to just send me an email with what exactly the questions are, I'm happy to follow up with Kira and the board office to make sure that it gets addressed. And I do hope to have Joe Magneri or someone directly from the district come at the next Parks meeting to talk more broadly about other things. So this was our Van Cortlandt Park centric November meeting. So
yeah, but this is an issue that was brought up 3 months ago, and I'd requested a report on it. And I understand that there may be extenuating circumstances why somebody was not able to attend, but it doesn't mean that they haven't gone away, and time is important.
No, and I totally understand. Please send the stuff over to me and I can follow up. Any other old business? All right, any new business? Jody Cologne.
Of course, an announcement. I'd like to invite everybody to Leaf Crunch at Henry Hudson Park. It will take place on November 19th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. We will be raking leaves, making compost out of them. We have some family-friendly activities. Last year, our hardest workers were 3-year-olds and 83-year-olds. So if you're between those ages or outside, come. And I also have additional bulbs that we didn't plant. We planted over 700 daffodil bulbs in the park on Bulbapalooza. So if anyone would like some of the Daffodil Project bulbs for free to plant in publicly visible spaces, you can reach out to me. The community board can put you in touch with me. I'm happy to give them to you, and the stewards of Henry Hudson Park also have tools that we can loan to you for the planting. And high school students that we can connect you to who will help you plant them. So reach out to the Friends of Fight and Dival, me, and I'll hook you up. And I'll see you hopefully in the park at Leaf Crunch.
Nice, thank you, Jody. That sounds wonderful. Any other, Bob Bender?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, we're not allowed to do any politicking on the community board, and God forbid I wouldn't think of doing such a thing. But everybody should know that there are 4 proposals on the ballot next week, and one of them is an Environmental Bond Act, which would address a lot of climate change issues and resiliency issues and so on. And so I would just urge everyone to become familiar with that proposal, and then go to the polls and vote as you see fit.
Thank you, Bob. Nice. I appreciate you bringing that up, for sure. Anybody else? All right. Well, so I want to, once again, I just want to thank both of the commanding officers for staying up late and coming to our committee meeting. We really, really appreciate it. So thank you. And it's wonderful to meet both of you. And to everybody else, Stephanie and Frederick and all of our wonderful speakers, thank you for staying to the very end. We appreciate this kind of community engagement. It really makes a difference. And with that, I move to adjourn. Well, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Usually the most popular motion of the meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Have a wonderful night.
Good night.
Good
Good night,
night.
everybody.
Good night.